What's going on? I want to talk to you today real quickly about a debate that's going on in the hitting world. Also, I want to talk to you about a drill that I like to do. I believe that the debate that Teacherman is currently teaching, where what you want to be able to do is create a stretch position. That way, everything unlocks and loads. And the current objection is the example of a one-handed swing. Now, where they both come together is both are inevitably landing in a position where they're spiraling off this back hip. So a lot of the debate is happening with a lot of similarities. With that being said, I think that you can introduce both methods into your swing and be very successful. I think that you could do the same for either method and be very successful. So there's not one cure-all, fix-all for every single type of swing. I am a believer that you need to accomplish the same things to get the same type of results consistently. For example, I think everybody agrees that contact should be somewhere where we can get to the ball with two hands. All right, cool. If we can all agree on that, we can agree that whatever gets us to that point where we are behind that ball, in the debate that I agree with, that if we can get behind that ball, we can stay behind it longer, there's more room for error. Girls softball's really developed and held on to this term. It's called bat lag, but I started hearing this from my coach Coop in the Wareham Gateman organization, and he took to teaching me a new style and approach where it was gap to gap and have a lot of bat lag. Well, I eventually got a lot bigger and I kind of outgrew that hitting philosophy. However, I've held on to a lot of the things that he taught me. And the reason why I adopted this theory to be a good launch point from was because the way that he explained bat lag, and you wanted to stay behind it. Now, he had a process where he would bring guys over to one of the gigantic light towers at the stadium, and he had, you know, the equivalent to like a heavy bag up against this big pole, and he'd set us up there, and he'd have us hit and smash, and he'd have us stick that spot. And when we stuck that spot, we wanted to really hold contact. And if we were practicing his bat lag that he would teach, and we were complementing it with that exercise, there was a lot of power that you can develop into that swing. Let's move on a little bit further. All right, cool. I believe that we should have our bat in a position where it's not getting hooked behind our head, because it's much harder to turn the thoracic spine than it is to turn your lumbar and core. I'm sorry, I got that wrong. I meant your cervical spine, because you're really working with this area than it is your thoracic spine. So your thoracic spine, if your shoulder sits on the outside, that sits on the side and the outside, or it's in this area, it's not going to ever be in a position where your shoulder's not driving it through. However, if your hands are up higher, you wrap, now you have to rely on a different portion of your body providing power, which is a fairly small area, which we don't really strengthen like that. So, all things aside, the drill that I wanted to show you today was complementing that one-handed swinging program. I like his method a lot. I'm doing him a dishonor by not knowing his name off the top of my head. I have Teacher Man, and he's the one that's teaching the big explosion, but the guy that's teaching the one-handed theory, he poses his argument, which is a very fair argument, that Ken Griffey really had a tall, longer stance, and it almost seemed effortless, the way that he'd hit home runs. Well, with that being said, he developed what it would feel like to swing on one foot, which I agree with. With one hand, which I agree with. Now, the drill that I want to, create with you today is getting into this position where we're going to drive in a nice relaxed position. Now, if you notice that might be a little bit, blended into the background, but I have a bench here sitting behind me at the right height for about a belt high fastball. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to uncork my hips because I already have my leg in that L position. I'm going to uncork my hips a little bit. I'm going to finish and follow through. I'm going to feel my weight on that back portion, like I just lifted that baseball. I have good balance the whole way through. I want to do it from different areas too. So let's just say I want to work on that outside pitch, right? I'm looking, I'm trying to stay longer with it a little bit longer. Uncork my hip, push it the other way. And that's how we should be focusing on these drills. Even though I mentioned in a few videos back that one-handed swings are really not what we're supposed to be doing, I say that because unless you understand the end result on a one-handed swing with a right hand, you shouldn't be taking them. That's what I want to get into next. With your right hand, well, my right hand, my bottom hand, I want to put myself in a position where I swing and I follow through, but I'm not getting too far extended, because if I'm getting too far extended, my hand can never reach that spot. I may have already committed to a pitch I'm going to hit one-handed. Not what we want to do, and that's not what this gentleman's philosophy teaches. Not at all. He teaches that this is your power hand, which I 100% agree with. He also says that this is the hand out front, so it's directing. I also believe that that can be a 50-50 thing, that you can do it with both hands. All right, cool. That's where we differ. I don't think that's much of a big difference. He'll also probably critique me and say I didn't watch his whole theory, which he's probably correct as well, but I'm complimenting his theory because I believe in order to receive the proper follow-through, and you see Mookie Betts probably doing this better than anybody, you have to be able to complement every single one of these things. All right, so if we're focusing on that one-handed swing, we're getting into that hip positioning, uncock the hips, and focus on bringing that hand backwards at the back end of this. Bringing it backwards. That way, we have more balance. We get out here, we're a little bit less balanced. Get it back around us, and that's why that top hand's so important. So we were talking about those drills with the top hand, and being able to get it up and finishing. The same thing goes with this hand. You have to make sure that you're getting that hand behind you, so if that hand is following, it can stick with that bat. All right, let's be quicker. Let's take more reps. Let's get into a comfortable position to do so. I do also believe in taking swings one-handed if you're focusing on keeping that weight loaded on the back leg. So if I am doing it, make sure I'm giving myself enough room. That way I don't break my back. But if I am doing a one-handed swing, I want to make sure that I do everything that I can to make sure that my weight is always staying on that back leg, that I'm not drifting. All right? A lot of people say, oh, drifting isn't that bad. We see a lot of guys doing that in baseball. Not if they can gather the leverage, get to that ball with the right timing and stay behind it. The only time that they are drifting and we catch them on film doing so is when they're getting beat on a pitch. Really, some of these guys are so strong that they can get away with it. They can get away with mistakes, and then they have results, and then you can point to a sample size where they're having success with bad mechanics. Listen, we can't base our swings off of bad mechanics. What we practice is what we're gonna do in the game. That's why it's so important that we are efficient. So one-handed swings, let's focus on this. We wanna make sure that our weight is right over our caboose, all right? So when we make that weight transfer, it's not gonna drift forward, and we're finishing and following through in a position where our top hand could have stayed with that bat, all right? Not always are you gonna have the complete range of motion, depending on what pitch you're working on. As I talked about the other day, it's very important that you are deliberate with each pitch in the zone. So if I am doing this drill with just one hand and not with grooving it and being in a relaxed spot and focusing with it, all right, if I am doing it with just one hand, I'm gonna imagine that low outside pitch. How am I gonna get to it? Great, bang. And I'm gonna keep that weight over that one leg. So I have the most balance that I can possibly have from this position. That way, when I put it all together, boom. I'm in a nice balanced position. I'm still loading backwards. I was able to get behind that ball, and I had nice drive behind it. All right, let's do it lower. All right, cool. Boom. Same exact thing. All right, so as long as I'm focusing, boom, I can get to those positions and follow through. Be there consistently. The more we practice our follow through, the quicker we'll get there. And in order to have a good follow through, you do have to have these things like bat leg. Because if we are down on the ball, that is the most unnatural thing. There's not many people can do it without having a cross grip. Boom. And we all know that you're not as quick to the ball when you're like this. All right? You still want to be in a somewhat neutral spot. Nice grip. However, this might be able to change between myself and a person with smaller hands. You do want to make sure that it gets there and behind the strongest part possible. And I do agree with this. So how can all these things be wrong? All right, I just talked about how one-handed swings can help us get into that balanced and finished position. And I talk about how important that is. And Teacher Me talks about that load and finish, but very rarely does he talk about the back end of the swing. He does talk about it in one video where you have to fall back into a pool. That's great. But how do you teach mechanics? I'm afraid that this is not his fault, but it might be because he hasn't been able to experiment in games at that speed and that level. Maybe in a machine that's gonna be driving to the same spot. But we have different variables. Batter's box, pitcher, setting up from different sides of the rubber, quick pitching us. These are all things that, yeah, he says that these things solve, but in order for all of us to be as effective as him, maybe he developed that portion because he's so, when he finishes and follows through, that maybe at one time when he was doing this, he had such a great follow through that all this worked for him and he was able to push and teach this. That's all I'm saying. God bless. I hope y'all learned something. Remember, set yourself up on a chair or something that's behind you. This is the high pitch. All right, cool. I'm going to get my hips into that position. I'm going to uncork them, finish and follow through. All right, cool. That's a high pitch. Very rarely do I finish with two hands, but let's try to do it. All right, let's try to get the thing over my shoulder. Boom. Seems like a pretty good approach. I'll catch y'all later.